everyone and welcome. So today's video is going to be my tips and tricks for taking online classes. So many schools are going to be starting either fully or partially online in the fall. So I think it's really important that people have good strategies that they can use to do really well in this weird learning environment. I am a rising sophomore at Northwestern University. We're on the quarter system, so last quarter was completely online for us and also fully pass-fail. I ended up taking 4 classes, which is pretty standard for a quarter. 3 were synchronous and 1 was asynchronous. I did really well in all of them. I passed with a high enough margin that I would have normally gotten A's in all of my classes. But I know a lot of people who struggled with this learning format, which is totally fair. It is really difficult to switch to the online format, especially if you're more of a group study person. And so that's why I wanted to share my tips and tricks, because I think they can be really, really helpful, especially if you are a rising freshman and you're not sure how college classes are in the first place. These tips are all from my personal experience, things that really helped me out and helped me do really well in my classes. They may not help everyone and they may not be perfect for you, but I'm hoping you can at least get some ideas, learn some new methods to help you get through this really weird learning environment. Also, sorry if my voice sounds weird at any points. I have allergies and I'm kind of just struggling with a little bit of a sore throat, so please bear with me. And on that note, let's just jump into the video. So my first tip for you guys is don't procrastinate your asynchronous classes. Asynchronous classes are just ones that don't meet at a specific time. It can be so easy to push those classes off to the last minute, but I promise it'll bite you in the butt. If you think it's hard to catch up on work, imagine trying to catch up on a whole class. They just take up a big enough chunk of time that they're hard to make up fast, especially if you have other work you really need to get through. My one asynchronous class was intro biology, and I know tons of people who took it. I know a lot of people who really pushed it back though and did it at the last minute, and it ended up causing them to feel way more stressed and also give them less time to do the homework. I would always do my asynchronous classes really early, either at the time they would normally be taught had we been in person or before that. I really like to chunk my asynchronous classes with my synchronous classes, so I would have 2 synchronous classes back to back and then just do the asynchronous one right afterwards. Just get them all done in one swoop. It gives you much more time to do your homework if you've done the class earlier on. You have to do the class before you can do the work, so by pushing the class back, you push all the work back with it. And it's really one of the worst ways you can end up getting behind in your online classes. My second tip, which is in a pretty similar vein, is don't procrastinate your work. Especially in online classes, it can be really easy to just forget about your work or push it back because you don't have your friends around you as much to remind you about it, and you're not going to be around your professors and TAs as much to get reminded about it that way either. Especially if you're a freshman and you are not used to the college class workload, you might underestimate the amount of time you need to finish an assignment. So I highly recommend just doing your work as soon as possible. It honestly helped me so much to just get my work done sooner, because especially if I had questions about my work, I would have enough time to email my professors and get responses back, or ask my friends in my classes for help, which is super useful. So I highly recommend giving yourself as much time as you can to do your work by starting it as soon as possible. And once it's all done, you can just do whatever you want and you don't have to worry about it. So my third tip for taking online classes is making group chats with people in your classes. I know it can be a lot harder over Zoom to meet people and talk to people, but this is a great way to not only get to know more people, but also to get more help. So I took calculus last quarter, and the professor would put us in breakout rooms often so we could work on problem sets together and things like that. One day when I was in one of those breakout rooms, one of the girls asked, can we exchange numbers and make a group chat? So I put together a group chat of everyone and also my other friends in the class, and people just continue to add their friends. So eventually we ended up with a pretty big group chat of all these people in the class, and it was so useful to have that group chat, especially because there were really frequent homeworks and a lot of them were confusing, and we could work together on a lot of these problems that were difficult. If you find yourself in a breakout room for a class that you think you would need some sort of help in, or it'd be good to know more people in, ask them for their number so you can make a group meet or some other form of group chat. It is so useful to have that group chat to work on homework, study questions, practice problems, all sorts of other things, and also just get reminders about when things are due. There were so many times in my math group chat where someone would go, hey, can I get some help with this homework? And another person would go, wait, there was homework? So I highly recommend making the group chats as also a way to just get reminders to stay on track with things. My fourth tip is have Zoom study sessions. So I did this for math a lot. We would get practice exams from our professor, and right before the exams we would Zoom and work on them together. It was super helpful as a way to just check answers with people and also go through the methods for the problem, especially when sometimes our professor's explanations could be a little bit confusing. It can be really, really helpful, especially if you in general are much more of a group study person. I know personally I do really well studying individually, but I know tons of people who really like to just study with others, in which case Zoom study sessions are absolutely the way to go during a pandemic. You can use Zoom study sessions for all sorts of things, like working on practice problems together, quizzing each other on things. You can also screen share things like Quizlets and Kahoots to help you study, and Zoom study sessions can also just be a good way to chat with people. Definitely, if you want a very focused study session, say that at the beginning. Be like, hey, I want to stay on track with this. But if you're down, if everyone in the group is down, sometimes a little more relaxed, chill study sessions where you can also chat are great ways to just stay connected with people when you're all taking online classes. My fifth tip is contact your professors and TAs when you need help. You're gonna hear this from so many people because it is super, super important whether you're taking in-person classes or online. All of my professors and TAs held Zoom office hours weekly, and you could also email them to set up appointments with them. I personally never did that because I am more of the kind of person who just likes to email them a question and then just get an email response, and that works fine for me. But if you prefer having a conversation with them about things, or you think you have a question that needs some more explanation, I recommend going to the Zoom office hours or setting up one of those appointments, because it can be super helpful to get that personalized explanation, especially if you didn't understand something the first time in class, or you have a question that requires more in-depth discussion. My sixth tip, can't say sixth. Tip number 6 is to talk in your classes. A ton of classes are really discussion based, especially language classes. For that reason, you're not going to be getting the full experience from them if you're not engaging with the class and if you're not talking during the class. Especially for language classes where you need that practice to be able to really learn the skill. In a lot of language classes and discussion-based classes, there is a participation grade. So talking during class not only is just important for you to learn, but it's important for you to get a good grade. So definitely talk as much as you're able in those classes. I also took a more discussion-based gender studies class in which I did talk a lot and answer a lot of the questions, and it honestly helped me gain a lot more from the class than had I just sat there listening. Engaging with the discussion and engaging with my peers and the professor was really helpful for gauging whether or not my understanding was accurate and for getting more opinions from my peers based off of what I had already been thinking. In tons of these discussion-based classes, the way you're going to get the most knowledge and the way you're going to actually engage with the material is through discussion. So if you really want to gain the most from those classes, you have to be willing to talk. Also, don't be afraid to ask questions in Zoom classes. I know a lot of people felt pretty intimidated to ask questions in a lot of my classes, maybe just because we're not used to the online format, but it is so helpful to ask questions and then get these important answers. I know in my math class, I was one of like 2 people who felt comfortable asking questions, and so many times after I'd ask something, one of my friends would text me and go, "Thank goodness you asked that because I was too afraid to." And it's honestly so helpful for you and for everyone else in your class. Like, it's not just gonna help you when you ask questions, because odds are there's someone else who's confused about the same thing. So asking these questions is not only gonna help you, but it's gonna help your peers. I know some of my professors said if you have a question, you can either say it out loud or put it in the Zoom chat. And if you're more comfortable doing the Zoom chat, do that instead. That's just as good in terms of asking questions. Just don't be afraid to ask your professors questions, because that's what they're there for, and they really want to help you do well in your classes. It will help you gain more from the class if you interact with it in both asking questions, answering questions your professor poses, or just having discussions with your peers. And I know it can be a bit intimidating, but honestly, once you start doing it regularly, the nerves will wear off. Like, I know I was scared at first when I started asking questions and saying things during my classes, but it really did help me learn a ton, and honestly was super rewarding. So my 7th tip is find individual study strategies that work really well for you. Group studies sessions, as I said earlier, are still going to be very possible in this online format. However, a lot of times you are probably going to end up in a situation where it's just going to be you studying on your own. So working to find the strategies that help you the best are going to be great. For online bio, I would make tons of flashcards. And when I say tons of flashcards, I mean like big stacks of flashcards. Because for me, just writing things down over and over again and being able to flip through and quiz myself was so helpful, especially for classes that are more memorization based. For math, because it was more about learning how to use certain formulas and do them in a certain way, and because my tests online were all open note, what I did to study was just do tons of practice problems on my own and also reread my notes and like underline and highlight things. Right before the exam, I would make a page in my notes, just things to remember on the exam, and just write them down. Like, don't forget to factor a certain way, don't forget to split the integral, little reminders for myself that would help jog my memory during the exam. Okay, so my 8th and final tip is do not overload your classes, especially if you are a rising freshman. Your classes will still take lots of time even if they're online. Some of them will even take more time. In the in-person math class, I had winter quarter. You just took the notes during class and then did homework. In the online version, the next quarter, because it was a 2-quarter sequence, we had to take the notes beforehand and then go through the notes in class and then do all the same amount of homework. So it actually took more time in the online version than it did in person. So that's why you still should expect your online classes to take up a big chunk of your time, because the workload is not going to get easier, it's just going to look different. I know lots of people who spring quarter decided to take extra classes because everything would be pass-fail and online. And because it was pass-fail, they were able to do so, but they were still struggling a lot under the sheer amount of work they had. Especially if you're a freshman and you're not used to the college level workload, I highly recommend just taking the standard number of classes. Don't overload your schedule, don't take all extremely difficult classes, because even though it is online, it's still gonna be an extreme workload, and if you're not used to that, it might detriment your grades. Obviously, you know yourself best. Do whatever you think is best for you. If you want to take more online classes and you feel confident overloading, go for it. Just be aware of how much you can handle, how much of a workload you can deal with. Also, you need to give yourself breaks. You need to give yourself enough time to relax and recover, especially in such a stressful situation with this whole pandemic happening. Also, there is no shame in dropping a class if you do try to overload and find that it is too much for you. So that is the end of this video. Thank you all for watching. I really hope these tips help you. Stay safe. Good luck in all of your classes. I hope fall quarter goes really well for you, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.